communicate.
Yes, it is nice. So
We'll start from the beginning then.
for the Energy Expo 2023, I welcome Professor Soteris Kalogirou, University of Cyprus, Cyprus. He works as a full professor in Department of Mechanical Engineering and Dean of School of Engineering and Technology. Also, he is a editor-in-chief for one of the few prestigious journals in elsewhere. One of them is Renewable Energy, where he is working as a editor-in-chief and deputy editor-in-chief for Energy Journal. Also, he is a fellow of European Academy of Sciences and founding member of Cyprus Academy of Sciences, Letters and Arts. So I welcome this prestigious personality in Europe and Cyprus to present his views about this conference and brief us about latest trends in technology, particularly building integrated technologies and hydrogen things. Welcome, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the nice invitation to be with you. Actually, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the renewable energy systems. I'm going to talk about the general status or the current status in the world, how much renewables we put, and some prospects with respect to the advancement of the technology. As you understand, nowadays everybody speaks about renewables, and this is something which makes me myself particularly very happy, because for many years I was working on this field and trying to convince people to apply renewables. It's unfortunate that this is combined with some climate effects I will show in my first slides in the introduction, but at least we take this as an advantage. So in this presentation, I'm going to start with a short introduction about climate change. Then I'm going to talk about the status of the various renewables that you see here, and I'm going to talk about prospects of the technologies. Starting with the climate effect, that I think nowadays everybody is convinced that something is going on with the climate, that something is happening because of our action as human beings on this planet. And mainly this is related to the use of the fossil fuels and the greenhouse gases that we emit all the time to the atmosphere. So we hear or we see this kind of news almost every day on our television, and it's a matter of time when this kind of effects will hit us personally at the place where we are living. I would say that a few years ago, people were talking about global warming, which is true that global warming is happening. However, global warming by itself, it doesn't represent fully the whole problem. And now the new term, which is climate change, represents better what is happening, because we do not only have warm summers, we also have very unstable winters. You see these two examples here, one from India and one from Germany. So it doesn't matter if it's a developing country or a developed country. The human suffering is the same, as you see in these pictures. Actually, as human beings, we are very weak with respect to human forces. And when this happens, we have problems. And nowadays, we even have this term climate refugees, representing people that have lost their properties because of the climate effects. If we try to see a little bit more scientifically what's going on, this is a representation of the climate in the last 400,000 years. And this is done in the Vostok ice core, and it's a base in East Antarctica. A Korean expedition went there, took samples of the ice deposit over those years, and by analyzing those samples, they are able to represent the climate and have an idea what is going on. So people that do not believe that something is going on today related to the human activities say, why we worry? You see here, every 100,000 years, there's a peak. So, and this is correct, it is shown on this diagram. However, this peak, and if you take the CO2, for example, which you can read it on the right-hand side of this graph, it was never more than 300 ppm. Nowadays, the present value is more than 400, as I will show in the following slide, which means that something which we do today is creating the problem. If we try to see what's happening with the CO2 in the atmosphere in the last 1,000 or so years, you'll see that everything was nice and smooth until suddenly there was a sudden increase. And what actually happened at that point, at around 1850, we had the Industrial Revolution, where we developed the internal combustion engine originally by burning huge quantities of coal, and subsequently use of the development of diesel engine and the use of all these fuels that we know and that we pollute the atmosphere. If somebody wants to see the CO2 value in the atmosphere, you can visit this website here. I did this a few months ago, and in May, for example, this year, it was 424, well above the 300 that we have seen over the 400,000 years that we have records in the, as I have shown in the previous slide. So the only way to get rid of this is to move into renewables. Before I show the status of the renewable, I would like to show just one slide about the conventional fuels, and this has to do with reserves. Of course, we have reserves from a number of years. For example, you see here coal, another 140 or so years, crude oil and natural gas, around 50 years. You may notice that these numbers have not changed over the years. And the reason in that is not that we spend less fuel, but because we have found some new resources and some new ways of producing oil. For example, the use of shale oil, where from the shale formations we can create some quantities of oil. So this is the issue that we have also these limited resources, although I believe that eventually we will not drop this kind of fuel because we will run out of it, but because we would like to do so because in order to protect the atmosphere. One example I give usually is that the Stone Age doesn't finish because we are left without stones. We still have stones today. However, it's the same that will happen here. We'll still have oil, but we'll probably use renewables instead of this. Of course, the biggest problem is the environmental issues related to the use of these fuels. And China and India nowadays, as the more polluting countries and the more populous countries with more than 1.6 billion people inhabiting these places, and of course the needs for energy are huge. And there are a lot of emissions going into the atmosphere. I would like to point out that although China is one of the most polluting countries, it's also a champion in the use of renewables, as I will show in the following slides. Actually, what we are targeting here is to avoid this kind of situation, to have all these huge quantities of fuel gases and fumes polluting the atmosphere. Now, if we go to the renewable energy system, which is the main subject of this presentation, we're talking about renewable energy systems. In the first category, solar, thermal, and the photovoltaics, the hydro system, wind energy systems, and biomass, biogas, biofuel, these other big family of renewables that we can use to produce energy. We would try to see some horizontal indicators for the year 2022. All these are based on international reports as shown on the source at the bottom of each slide. You will notice that there was a further increase in 2023, which refers to 2022. And if we take the previous year, there is an increase. You see that here we have almost 3,500 gigawatts of installed power of total renewables. And last year, in 2022, it was 3,146. If we try to subtract the hydro, which is a big family of renewables, then this goes down to 2,227. Other noticeable figures are this 1,185 gigawatts for photovoltaics, the 906 for wind power, of course, the 542 gigawatts thermal for the solar thermal. It cannot be underestimated. And if we see the bottom graph here, we see that the biggest increase occurred in the photovoltaics area, as I will show in the following slides. The share of renewable in the total energy mix, there are not a lot of numbers on this slide. However, the important figure is this for 11.5%. This is the total share of renewables in the energy mix of the planet. It's not a very big figure by itself until now. It will increase in the coming years, definitely. A more positive picture is shown here, where we have only the electricity generation. As you see, almost 30% of electricity nowadays is produced with renewables. And this figure is expected to increase even more in the coming years. Some big issues and some big obstacles I would like to mention that are when we install renewables is, first of all, the price per kilowatt hour and the permission procedures. I will start from the second. Permission procedures need to be simplified. For example, in Europe, I live, where we have a declared policy by the European Commission that we will install more and more renewables. At the same time, we have very complicated permission procedures. So we need to simplify this and allow the people to install more and more renewables. There's other issue, which is the price. As you see here, there is, for the main renewable energy sources here, you see on top, there is a comparison of the price in 2010 and 2021. And this gray area here is the range of fossil fuels price. As you see, renewables nowadays in 2021 they are lacking a little bit in the years because they need to gather the data and analyze to find these things. You see that renewables are either cheaper, for example, these two cases here, or well within or at the low range of the fossil fuel range. So there is no excuse not to install renewables because they are even more cost effective than the fossil fuels. Another issue is this global investment in new power capacity. In other words, as shown here, almost 3/4 of the total investment in 2022 went to projects for renewables. So people would like to put their money into this technology because they see it as the future use of energy. So very, very optimistic in the sense that people will definitely put more money into this area and have more renewables in the coming years. Right, going into the various technologies by itself, starting with the solar thermal power. Here we have two types of systems utilizing either the thermal radiation of the light of the solar or the light of the solar radiance. In the first category, we have the solar thermal systems, and we have two types of systems belonging here: the low temperature systems represented by the flat plate collector, which is the most used type, mostly for water heating and low temperature, industrial processes, and the high temperature systems, mostly for CSP, concentrated solar power, and high temperature industrial processes. In the second category, we have the use of the light of the solar radiance. We have the solar photovoltaics. Going into details of each one of those, you see that the solar water heating installations are a mature technology with a substantial contribution. 442 is the current gigawatt thermal capacity. Most of these, there is also here the differentiation between, we're talking about glaze or glaze collectors. So most of the systems are based on glaze collectors. The unglaze with respect to solar thermal power, you see here that the situation is not at a very low temperature. Because, however, we have a substantial 6.3 gigawatts of installed capacity, mostly in the United States and Spain, as you see from the graph here. And actually, there was a drop in the previous year because of some decommissioning in the United States of the old CSP plants. And you see the little drop here, although it's already replaced now. I must stress that many CSP systems are under development in many countries of the world, and mainly, I would say, in the MENA region, the Middle East and North African countries. Of course, now the area is suffered from the war, but it's independent of that. Many have already these plants, and all these new facilities incorporate some kind of energy storage. And energy storage of thermal energy is much more convenient than storing electricity. And this, of course, is done in order to be able to work the system during the nighttime, because the power plant is quite expensive, and we don't afford to have it idle for half of the time because it's nighttime. So by thermal energy storage, you can continue the operation of the plants during the night as well. Going to photovoltaics, the four basic categories starting from the right going to the left. We have the polycrystalline, monocrystalline, and amorphous silicons, and we have also these other thin films technology, which are deposition of photovoltaic material on various substrates and various thin films. This is considered by many as the future of photovoltaics. The actual efficiencies obtained by these photovoltaics are quite high nowadays in laboratories. However, they suffer from sudden degradation of the performance. So after a few weeks of exposure to sunshine, they lost their photovoltaic potential. And once this problem is solved, maybe this would be the future. With respect to the stored capacity, this is a very win-win situation, I would say, a very successful situation. As you see, the curve is quite steep, with a sudden increase from year to year. And this occurred actually after the 2010, about that period when the Chinese entered into the construction of the photovoltaics. The current figure is, we already said, is 1,185, with 243 gigawatts installed just in 2022. If you make a simple calculation, you will realize that this 243 gigawatts of solar PV capacity that is added worldwide is equivalent to the installation of more than 100,000 solar panels every hour, of course, worldwide, but as a figure is quite huge and quite impressive. And of course, this will continue in the coming years. With respect to the countries or the regions that are successful here, you see that China is leading the world with 44%, and the rest of the world, you see the other countries here and other regions. Okay, with respect to current research, the PV, there are a number of institutes and research centers which are focused on the high performance cells and modules to produce better photovoltaics, new nanomaterial applications, both for the photovoltaic effect, but also for cleaning the surfaces of photovoltaics, and the application of advanced manufacturing techniques to lower the cost. And of course, the trend nowadays is towards very large systems. This one example here in India, 1,000 megawatts in 2017. Later on, the same year, we have the biggest that is until now the biggest in the world, with 1,747 megawatts. This is installed in China, in Mongolia, in the desert, and as you see, these plants are quite huge. Moving on to hydropower, this comes in a variety of sizes, large hydro, small, mini, micro, even pico. You see the ranges here. With respect to a large hydro, the biggest scheme is the 18 gigawatt scheme in the Three Gorges in China. This is a place where three rivers meet and continuous one river from there on, and that area used to flood very, very often. So the Chinese government put this huge dam there with hydro turbines, and out of this they can get 18 gigawatts of electricity, which is quite huge as an amount of energy. With respect to installed capacity, you see that China again leads the world with 30%, with Brazil, Canada, and United States coming second and third, as you see here. Next area is wind energy. Here we have a variety of systems, either onshore, offshore, or built-in integrated wind turbines. With respect to current capacity, again, this is a mature technology with very good applications year by year, which are increasing. The current value, as you see, is 906. For many years, wind was more than photovoltaics, but now the situation is reversed. And as you see, we have a good and substantial amount of wind energy installed. 80% of this are installed offshore, and I must stress here that the same turbine, when installed offshore, can produce 20% more energy because of the lack of boundary effects. There are no mountains, no trees, no buildings, no nothing that will affect the wind pattern, and thus this kind of turbines produce more when installed offshore. And the target is to reach 380 gigawatts by 2030, mainly from offshore applications. The last category is biomass. As I said at the beginning, we have a number of categories here, either biomass, biogas, biofuels like biodiesel. Many consider waste as municipal solid waste and landfills as renewables, which are not actually. Mainly we're talking about supplying renewable energy from forest residues and energy crops, either as wood chips or from the leaves of the trees. And the big question here is to have the land cultivated for the human food in order to produce biofuels. And of course, the answer is no, is to use land that is not cultivated for this purpose and cultivated on purpose to produce energy with energy crops. For example, these poplar trees can get 5 meters high in 3 years. So if you have a plant cropping and planting of trees, you can have a continuous supply of thermal energy. However, the problem here is not the thermal energy by itself, it's mainly the biofuels. With all those millions of cars on the streets every day, you understand that the problem is to satisfy these needs. Of course, this will make change completely and radically in the coming years with the electrification of transportation, for example, electric vehicles at the beginning and then fuel cells vehicles. However, at the moment, we have a need for this kind of fuel. Worldwide, you see the biomass is not as good as the other resources with only 12.6% contribution. And if you try, for example, the transportation here, the contribution is very small, at 3.6%. However, this is something that will change, as I said already. With respect to bioelectricity generations, you see that here Europe leads the world, with China coming third. And with respect to the fuels, usually we are talking about ethanol and biodiesel. Concluding, I would say that the prospects and some prospects in research areas, the main purpose of many laboratories and research centers worldwide is to increase the efficiency of the various renewable energy technologies, design renewable energy components at the lowest possible cost so as to have more and more. Many areas of the world, and of course the whole European Union by 2050 will be 100% renewables, which means that we have to change radically the way we think of how to produce energy. Of course, we're going to have high shares of renewables by doing so. We need to transform completely the power system in the way we think that we produce energy today. And of course, we need to consider storage and integrations like the smart energy system will, by artificial intelligence, can decide whether the energy produced by renewables will go to storage or to the use or whatever other use. And of course, we're talking about effective coupling, not only for electricity, but also for heating, cooling, and I would say mainly for transportation. Just to acknowledge my main sources used in this report. As you see here, various international reports are used, but also my experience as editor of Renewable Energy Journal. And I will conclude by saying that there are lots of opportunities to utilize effectively renewable energy technologies. I have shown a number of areas, as you see. These are nowadays more cost-efficient and effective options than renewable fuels. We should never underestimate the climate problems that eventually at some stage will affect us personally, and it is in our hands to use renewables effectively. Closing, I would like to give you my editorial and the university email addresses for people that are willing to write to me and ask something, any questions on this as we do this from a distance. Thank you for your attention. I would be happy to receive questions, possibly by email or something like that. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Professor. It is a very nice presentation in very short time, and I hope all the participants, including the academia as well as the industrial partners, will gain very beneficial inputs from this, and they can see how the upcoming days the renewable investments are going to hike, and how can we survive with this climate change actions. Typically in Chile as well as in India, if you see now, there is a November and December, we are in the winter, still we are cloudy. In Chile is going to be enter into summer, still it is cloudy. So we are facing climate change.
Yeah.
Typically in Latin American countries, we are very sensitive about these issues. And
Leaving the other case, I would like to say to you that, to confirm what you said, actually, I think the seasons have shifted a little bit. So the winter comes late, the summer comes late as well. So it's something which is going with the climate, which probably we do not understand why it's happening, but it's there and we face it, and the effects are getting stronger and stronger, the climate effects. So
October is the hottest month since last 30-40 years in India. Never before.
Yeah.
So these are the impacts of climate change that we need to face, and with the help of renewables, we are trying to solve some issues. Again, I thank Professor Soteris for his valuable time and enlighten us with his brief presentation. Thank you so much. Please be there. I will